Welcome to the Hope Natural Health Podcast. I'm Dr. Erin Ellis, your host. On this show, we discuss all things health, hormones, and happiness with a little side of this thing called life. Nicole Bonilla is the founder of Gentle Tummy, a blog dedicated to creating delicious, easy-to-follow recipes that are gluten-free, higher in protein, and lower in sugar. After experiencing significant health challenges, Nicole has developed a unique perspective on managing anxiety, digestive health, and creating food that promotes overall well-being. What sets her apart is her emphasis on the profound connection between digestive and mental health, sharing mindsets that make healthier choices easier and anxiety more manageable. While not a healthcare professional, Nicole brings a lifetime of practical experience raising a family of 6 children, offering real-world solutions that work in busy households. I am excited she's on the show, so welcome, Nicole.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to be here.
Yay! I know we connected randomly. I don't even remember how it was several months ago, so I knew you would be perfect for the podcast to talk about the gut, diet, all the things, mental health. So your journey really emphasized that connection between digestive and mental health. So how have you seen anxiety manifest in the gut, and how does this gut-brain axis impact women?
Well, honestly, I had no idea that it even existed. I'm sure, like many others, it's not kind of part of our universal education, I guess you could say. It was in 2019 that I had like an anxiety overload, which caused some severe inflammation throughout my chest and my neck. And it was kind of spurred by, I guess you could say, a final straw. My 2 oldest children were leaving the home very soon, and it was ending that phase of my life and starting kind of a new phase. And I've been a creative director working from a home studio for the last about 25 years. And so was a workaholic who just worked harder, faster, stronger to kind of push past, feeling uncomfortable feelings and anticipating, these children leaving. And so basically my stress reserve tank was empty. And so with this overload of this anxiety, it kind of put me into a chronic fight or flight state. And so I went to see a homeopathic chiropractor who knew me very well. And he was able to kind of instantly diagnose that, that I was a workaholic who wasn't processing. And so my body just kind of gave up on me and was asking for help, you could say. And so he was able to quickly determine that we just needed to reset my gut. We needed to introduce some mindfulness, and we needed to calm down my nervous system. And so for me, that meant instantly going off of like processed foods and really trying to focus on an easily digestible diet that would help to calm, my digestive tract and be able to help relieve all the inflammation that I was feeling. And so that's where I was first introduced to that connection between the mind and the gut, and learned about something called the vagus nerve, which I had never heard of, which is the connection between the two. And so basically that breakdown really kind of hardwired that connection for me and became something that I couldn't ignore, but it also it opened a door to more knowledge and experience that has been a huge blessing to my life.
So from the time that he recommended all of these changes and you implementing them, how soon did you notice a difference in the way you felt?
Honestly, within a couple days, I was feeling better, which part of that was just awareness of, taking action to try and just relieve all that stress. And then it was over the next couple months, just felt great. And then ironically, I was starting to feel pretty good. This was in about February, March of 2020, and then we went into quarantine and lockdown. So I was actually very grateful to have already kind of gone through that hardest part before all of that happened, because obviously we all were overwhelmed, I'm sure, with a lot of stress and anxiety that came with that time of life.
Yeah. What would you mind sharing? Like, what was your diet composed of prior to this? Because I'm sure a lot of women can relate to what you were eating before, and maybe share a little bit about what you eat now or what you switched out.
Yeah, absolutely. I've always been, health conscious. I've always been very active and enjoyed going to the gym. So I, was a very health conscious person, not a real zealot, I would say, but, things like, artificially sweetened Quest protein bars or frosted mini wheats in the morning, or, probably lots of wheat bread, pastas and things. And then, having like my little stash of maybe some chocolate covered nuts in my desk or peanut M&Ms. That was one of my my weaknesses as well. And so once I, had this inflammation and then really needed to calm my digestive system, taking out all the processed foods that I was eating at the time. And so what really became kind of my staples was in the morning having a protein shake, which was with banana and some almond milk, and then adding in some flaxseed and some chia seed and some almond butter to that, and then a banana to bring in that sweetness. And so just trying to kind of get the proteins in the morning and getting a little bit of sweetness from the banana, but just something that would really kind of give me some energy. And most importantly, that was easily digestible. By having that smoothie, everything is broken down. And so that would go down very easily. And then like for lunchtime, real simply just having like a turkey wrap, with some lettuce, some high quality, lean sliced meats, a good quality cheese, and then like some tomato with it, because it's something that tastes really good. And again, it was just pretty gentle and would go down. And then for snacks, I really like oats. And so I would make some homemade granola bars, which would just have like some peanut butter and some honey and the oats in them. And then for dinner, I would say sweet potatoes were my savior. They were just so wonderful to have because they were filling, they tasted good, they were easy to prepare. At the times where my stomach felt the worst, I would simply just steam them and then serve them with just a little bit of butter and salt on them. That's when things were really feeling upset. And then as things felt better, bringing in some of the other easily digestible vegetables, such as like, yellow and green zucchini and some carrots. Eggs were wonderful. I really relied on having the scrambled eggs or some egg omelets with like mushrooms and spinach and some good quality cheese. And then I discovered something really fun, which is cottage cheese ice cream. And so that became something that I could make and, freeze in a variety of different ways and flavor it lots of different ways. Just really have something that was sweet. I would sweeten it with maple syrup. And so that was something that I could have as like maybe a little popsicle or even freeze it into ice cube trays, if I'd have just like a little bite of something, when I needed it. So just really focusing on easily digestible foods that, were high in protein and that had a good amount of fiber to them is what really helped me, feel nourished, but just kind of kept everything really calm.
So the science behind what she was experiencing was all of the inflammation was likely caused by the sugar and the processed foods, causing the inflammation, causing her cortisol to increase, causing the stress response. So she was constantly in this like fight or flight. And she had a whole bunch of stuff going on with, raising 6 kids and all of this, but the food was not helping. Now, a big caveat that I see with a lot of my women, it's like, well, they're so busy or they're exhausted. And so we really have to get to the root cause of those concerns first before we can get to, making these changes, because I don't expect someone to go from, eating nothing for breakfast to, making a smoothie or I should say maybe like an egg breakfast. I start with a smoothie because a lot of women and busy moms, I'm sure you're all listening and they're like, oh crap, I don't eat breakfast. And it's because they're too busy or they're not hungry. But if you start with something like a smoothie, it's very, like you mentioned, easy to digest, very healthy on your blood sugar, your adrenals, your thyroid, like all of the things, that are most active first thing in the morning, rather than going through the Starbucks line or the Dutch Brothers line and getting that, quote, sugar bomb that I call it, which is your breakfast of this, coffee drink with a lot of sugar in it just because you need the energy to get by, right? So that's the science behind, like, it made complete sense when you explained like what you were eating. And then like also too, I want to touch on the cravings. So the sugar cravings are a huge cue that you've got something going on with the gut and the gut's not happy. So let's dive into cravings and hormones specifically, like around PMS, because every woman out there that's menstruating has these PMS cravings, or even like during perimenopause and the mood swings. So how can like your philosophy of food as fuel first, satisfaction second, apply to this?
Yes. So I learned this actually kind of a painful way, in that with my third pregnancy about 20 years ago, during the pregnancy, I developed something where when I swallow, excess air goes down as well. And then it kind of gets into my esophagus, and then I have to burp that back up. Sounds very simple, but that over time just meant I'd have to eat very slowly and allow time for those burps to come back up. But when I had this breakdown in 2019, again, anxiety overload, it made that burping condition even worse. And because now it was introducing anxiety into it. And so what happens is when you become very anxious and nervous, the throat tightens up, your chest will tighten up. So as that air that I had swallowed, it would be very difficult to get that air to come back up. And so it would get stuck down into my stomach, which would literally inflate kind of like a balloon and it would become extremely painful. And I couldn't burp it up at that point. And so I would have to wait a couple hours, usually laying on my side on the couch, and wait for that air to come out another way. And, so with that, at times it would bring some IBS. So in a way, it was forcing my body to stay calm. It was forcing me to have to, keep that anxiety low and really have my nervous system calm, because then all my system is working properly and everything could flow easily. So that is kind of a little caveat for me, and something that requires me to have to really think about that food as fuel first, because I'm sure everyone can relate. When you have eaten something and you have a very painful reaction to it, it makes it much easier to maybe decline that in the future, or to realize, I really need to kind of change how I'm eating. And so with that food as fuel, it forced me to look at, okay, I have my taste bud that's kind of sitting right here above the neck, and am I letting it decide what goes down below the neck that now the rest of my body has to process? And so I have to really evaluate, do I really want to ask the rest of my body to process this thing that just my taste bud is telling me that it wants to eat? It's maybe not the best for me. And so if I can somehow make the taste bud happy with something that tastes great, then something that I know once it goes below the neck, it's going to be easy for me to process as well, then that's the sweet spot for me. And once I turned 40, I'm now almost 50, those symptoms of the perimenopause began. And like a lot of other my friends and women of this age, they feel a little bit more anxiety, or maybe unwarranted panic attacks or things that might come. And certainly, menstrual cycle has become irregular, and much more aware of the monthly cycle and how that affects mood and cravings and all of that. And so what I have found to really help keep all that as minimal as possible is just keeping my nervous system as calm as can be, and then anticipating where I am in that cycle that month, and knowing like, okay, during this time, I know I feel a little more bloated, or maybe prone to maybe being constipated. So I'm going to make sure I'm drinking more water. I'm going to maybe eat some foods that I know are even more gentle. Or during the second half, I know that I get a little more moody and that, the cravings become even more intense, because I'm maybe wanting something sweet as an emotional reward, as opposed to it being, something that my body is wanting to process. And so just knowing that has helped me to be able to be like, okay, I know I want something sweet. All right, let's have some fun little energy bites, or maybe like a cottage cheese mousse or something that, I can enjoy a bite of that, and that feels good and sweet, but I also know that this is the phase my body's in right now, and then I just want to help it through it so that we have the most peace and joy overall.
Yeah, it goes back to what you mentioned earlier, and what I kind of advocate for on like every episode is the awareness, right? So when you have those cravings, think about it, be like, where am I in my menstrual cycle? And, time flies, so you might not even realize that good old Aunt Flo is going to show up in a few days, and you're like, that's why I'm experiencing these cravings. So yeah, super, super important to just be aware. You touched on a few of your treats that you like some of your favorite things. Are there any other swaps, like maybe some gluten-free, high protein, lower sugar swaps that you could do from or like instead of the commonly processed snacks or comfort foods?
Yes, absolutely. So the first thing is for adding protein. There's kind of 4 ways that I find is the easiest way to do that. One is through a protein powder. I prefer protein powders that are naturally sweetened. I don't like to have the artificial sweeteners. They don't feel very good for me. And I use them sparingly. I won't have more than like a 1 protein serving per day. But that's an excellent way that can be incorporated into baking as well. There's a protein powder I really like using that is nut-based, and it's naturally sweetened with just some coconut sugar. And so I find the flavor works really well in baking, and then that's, adding in a good amount of protein. My other 2 favorites are cottage cheese and Greek yogurt. I love them both. And what's great about those is I found that even for some people who wouldn't want to drink a glass of milk, they might have a lactose sensitivity, can actually enjoy the Greek yogurt or cottage cheese because a lot of the whey has been removed. And so it can still, I have found it doesn't upset my stomach. And the Greek yogurt has that nice little tang to it. So it works great as a substitute for like sour cream or using it to replace like a heavy cream. So in things like sauces and dressings, like my ranch dressing, my Caesar, my honey mustard, I think I have all of those in my fridge right now. They all have used Greek yogurt as the base. Any marinara pasta sauce, you could instantly stir in like a cup of Greek yogurt into that, and now you have like a creamy pasta or marinara sauce. And then the cottage cheese as well. If you whip it down or just blend it in your blender or food processor, you can get rid of that curdled cottage cheese texture, which a lot of people aren't crazy about. But then you still get the health benefits of it, and it just has a real slight little cheesy flavor to it, which I find is really delicious. But it's very versatile to use as well, kind of once you whip it. And then the 4th way is just with the lean meats. I have a great method for really juicy pan-seared boneless chicken breast that takes less than 10 minutes, using a nice hot pan. And, that's really easy to batch prep and use in a lot of different ways. I really like to use a 7% fat lean ground beef. I'll cook that up. That's really easy to batch press, and that for me, I find that that's easily digestible. So those are kind of the 4 ways that I really like incorporating protein into my diet. And then for the natural sweeteners, maple syrup and honey, agave. What I found with those is that, they are still sugar. They are still going to spike your blood sugar, but they are a little bit lower on the glycemic index. But I also have found is they just have so much more flavor to them. So if you're, in cookies or muffins or cakes or anything, I find that they just are so much more fun in the flavor of them. And I have also found that as I use those, and it's kind of changed the sweet flavor a little bit for me, so it's not that really sweet, refined sugar sweetness, but I find it more satisfying, and I find that I crave less of it because it's satisfying in a different way for me, just emotionally also. And so I've really enjoyed that. And there's just, again, this other layer of flavor with these natural sweeteners that I didn't realize was there, that I have felt has been kind of masked by a lot of refined sugar. But again, they're all still sweets and have to be used in moderation. But for me, that's been a fun way to kind of replace some of the traditional sweeteners I was using with some natural options.
Yeah. How much or were you done? Sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say how much of your foods now do you actually make, like sauces? It sounds like you make everything from scratch-ish.
Just about. Yeah, I'd say 95%, because once you taste like homemade ranch dressing, you won't go back. Once you taste that Caesar dressing, or I love making an Alfredo sauce using Greek yogurt, along with some Parmesan cheese and some fresh garlic. And when you realize how quick and easy they are to make, and easy to just keep in your fridge in some nice little mason jars, it makes eating in a lot more appealing.
I was going to say, yeah. Did you have anything else to comment on the food swaps?
Sure. With gluten-free. That's
gluten-free. Yeah, big one.
Category that I love. For gluten-free flours, the options that I love using the most are oat flour, which you can actually just take old-fashioned oats or quick oats, throw them into your blender or food processor, and within 30 seconds, you have oat flour, which you can also buy it, but it's, so easy to just blend on your own. And then almond flour, I love using that as well, which is pretty much almonds. They're ground down, and that it is better to purchase. I haven't made that on my own. There's also cassava flour, which is grain-free and nut-free because it comes from the cassava root, which is similar to like a sweet potato. So I'd say those three flours are the ones I love the most for just the flavor. And then I also will bring in a gluten-free blend. There's lots of different options out there, and those typically have a blend of like a potato flour, a rice flour, and maybe a couple other things in it. But those do have a reputation for being a bit sandy in the texture of them or in the flavor. So a lot of my recipes, I'll use a little bit of that, so you get the nice lift that you get from them, but then incorporating in with maybe the oat or almond or cassava, which gives you so much more flavor and just are really fun to work with. And so I pretty much just avoid white flour for myself. I don't have a gluten allergy, so I found that I just feel so much better if I avoid using that. Yep. And another current trend, which is really fun for some no yeast bread alternatives, is to use Greek yogurt or cottage cheese with one of these flours like oats or almond or any of them, and then adding basically some baking powder to it. And then you can create these little quick breads that don't have to rise and that can be baked within about 25 minutes. So you can make some really fun hamburger buns, bagels, English muffins. Like, I've just been going crazy with it because they're so delicious. They're gluten-free. You don't have to wait for anything to rise, and they can be done within about 30 minutes.
Oh, wow. I'll have to look into that. So you're very busy raising a busy family. What are your top 1 or 2 practical strategies for implementing these healthier, gentle tummy eating habits that we've been talking about, even in chaotic households?
Yeah, I'd say number 1 is to have a plan. Just if you can go into it on the offense as opposed to being on the defense, that just makes all the difference. And so having a meal plan of what you're going to be eating that week, it takes a little more planning up front, but just then eliminates the guesswork, know exactly what to expect each day. And then that allows you to batch prep, allows you to, okay, if I know I have 3 dishes that can use chicken, well, Monday night, I'm just going to make a, bigger batch of my pan-seared juicy chicken. And then now I know I've got my protein ready for the rest of the week. The sauces, you can easily make those ahead of time and keep those in the fridge. So number 1 is to have a plan. And then number 2, I would say, is to camouflage and make it convenient. So I guess those are kind of 2 separate ones. So we'll combine them. Yeah. So what I have found is that if I will have it made and then just have it in convenient places, then the kids will naturally kind of gravitate towards that and use that. So for example, I'll make up a big batch of some pancakes, and then I'll, made with like some oat flour, Greek yogurt, or some protein pancakes. I have lots of different options. And then I'll just put those into the fridge, and they're already in, a container. And so the kids, when they get up in the morning, they can just pop them in the toaster, put what they want on it, and then they're off. Or when they come home from school, that's like a really good time to, serve them some things a little more nourishing, because that's usually when they're the hungriest. And so if I have some, muffins that I just made up, maybe some cottage cheese, banana, zucchini muffins, if I have those already made, they're sitting out on the counter. So when they walk in, the food's kind of already there, then they're going to naturally gravitate towards those things. And then with, that kind of camouflaging, I don't necessarily need to tell them what's in it. If I just sort of put it out and it looks good, then, they're more inclined to experiment with it. And then with the dinner meals, I'm always trying to incorporate as many vegetables as I can. I try to do kind of a 1/3 protein, 2/3 vegetable. That seems to work best for me. And then for the family, they like to have a grain in there as well. But, finally dicing like onions with like yellow zucchini or mushrooms, things like that you can saute, and then they really reduce in their size and kind of appearance. And then those could be blended into sauces. Like I have a mac and cheese recipe that uses butternut squash, yellow zucchini, and some onion that have all been roasted, and then they're all blended smooth into the sauce with some cottage cheese as well. It's been blended smooth, plus some other cheeses and things. But that's a great way where they don't necessarily know it's there, but it's just kind of worked in. with the meal. And then soups, what you can do is, again, take subtle vegetables like maybe big yellow zucchini and onion or green zucchini or others, cook those down, and then blend them into what the broth or the soup is going to be. Blend it smooth, and then put it back in your pan, and then maybe add your other chunky ingredients. And so they don't necessarily see those other vegetables, but they're just kind of all blended in.
Yeah.
So those are some things that have worked well for us.
Great tips. What is one easy, delicious, and gentle tummy recipe you think every woman should have in her arsenal to support her energy and hormone health?
I think that morning banana smoothie.
Yeah?
It really saved me. I apologize to get emotional.
I love that.
Yeah, just because when you don't feel well, you just need something.
Yeah.
And for me, that was something that was it was so gentle. It was, a sweet banana, so you have that, emotional satisfaction that comes with it. And then being able to add in, like that, cashew butter, almond butter. So now you're getting some healthy fats. You're going to stay full longer. And then let's bring in maybe some chia seeds or some ground flaxseed. You're not going to know they're in there, but that's just adding in some more nutrition for you. And then getting a little bit of protein powder in there. Again, that's just going to help with the satiety. And then, you're drinking it. So it's just simple and everything, it just really goes down easily. And whether it's, a breakfast or afternoon or whenever you need it, it's easy to make up, put it in a mug and take it with me if I'm going somewhere or, so I'd say that's probably, if I had to pick one, that would be my lifesaver and one that anyone can implement as well as customize however you like it.
Yeah, for sure. I love smoothies. I had one this morning with a banana too. Yeah, just to get, a little sweet, and then also I needed some carbs after the gym. So win-win with the protein. Can't forget the protein. Very important, ladies. Don't just have a smoothie with a bunch of fruit in it. We got to have the protein in there and some good healthy fats so you can stabilize the blood sugar, especially in the morning. So thank you for sharing that. We could probably talk about your whole website for many more hours, but we will make sure that we have it linked in the show notes. It's very simple, gentletummy.com, and her social media links. But I'll wrap it up with one final question I ask all my guests. What would be your best or favorite health tip that you can share with the audience?
It would have to be breathing. It's the most simple and most universal thing that we all do. And I think that's the most overlooked, because the breathing is the quickest way that we can let our nervous system know that we're safe, everything's fine, you don't have to protect us. And so the best breathing I have found is, they call it an exhalation breathing, which just means air comes in through your nose. And then for maybe 1 or 2 seconds, you're going to hold it for the same amount of time that you breathed in. And then as you exhale, you want to exhale twice as long as when you breathed in. So that's the simplest way to describe it. It can be done anytime. So it can be short or it can be long, depending on your situation. But just stopping, let the air come in through the nose, hold, and then just let it come out very slowly. And I guarantee you, repeat that, 3 to 5 times, instantly you're going to feel a little bit better, because that has worked for me every time. So
yeah, breath is so important, and we forget about it because we just do it automatically. So thank you for that reminder. There's also a really cool book called Breath. I don't know if you've read that, or I listened to it on Audible. Yeah, it's really good. It teaches you a lot about the breath, really. Things that you're like, there's a book about breathing. But it's really insightful. I learned a lot from it. Yeah, so check that out. Well, Nicole, it's been a pleasure to have you on this show. I really appreciate your time. I know that the audience shared a lot. And like I said, we'll have all of her social media, YouTube, Facebook, website in the show notes. Is there anything else you want to add before we close out?
Just encouragement that you can do it. And calming the mind calms the digestive system. And eating well is going to calm the mind. And that it's possible for those to work together in a way that can just help you feel peace and then prepare you to be able to manage the stresses of life that are inevitable and that are going to come our way. But I just hope to be able to offer the support to others that I wish I had had at the beginning of this journey.
I love that. Thank you so much for being here. We'll see you all again next week. Thank you so much for listening. Make sure to like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment below. And if you haven't done so, please be sure to give us a rating on your favorite podcast platform. Join us weekly as we inspire you to be your best version. For more, follow me on Instagram at dr.erinellis. Until next week, you got this.